Hi everyone, I'm your host, Sean Lee-Davies. I'm a filmmaker, entrepreneur, conservationist, and impact investor. And welcome to Our Future Nature podcast. We aim to empower you with the insights and knowledge to navigate the increasingly complex landscape of tomorrow. So brace yourselves as we go on an exhilarating podcast adventure and dive deep into what it truly means to be human in the 21st century. We'll explore the critical issues of climate change, artificial intelligence, biohacking, and longevity, as well as other emerging threats to humanity. And we'll be interviewing the leading change makers, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs from around the world. Welcome to Our Future Nature. Let's get on with today's episode. Hi everyone and welcome to Our Future Nature. My guest today is Christina Dean, or should I say Dr. Christina Dean. She's a sustainable fashion advocate and founder of social impact business R Collective. She began her career as a dentist and then retrained as a journalist, which led to the launch of Redress in 2007, which was Asia's first NGO that focuses on the fashion industry. Christina also launched a social impact business called R Collective, which creates unique pieces made from waste materials for the luxury fashion business and from luxury fashion houses. So she's here with me today to talk all about fashion's woes and social and environmental footprint, so we can see how we can make the world and make fashion less impactful and more sustainable. Hi, Christina. Thanks for joining us from London.
Sure. Nice to see you and speak with you.
It's great to see you in Singapore briefly in person. So thank you for joining the show.
Well, it's a pleasure. The last time we bumped into each other quite impromptu on the street. That was our last in-person hello. I won't say how I found you.
No, don't tell anyone.
No, we won't go to that.
You were looking at what I was looking at on my phone, were you? Walking up behind me.
No, I think it was a Sunday morning and maybe you'd had quite a lively Saturday night. We'll leave it from there. Let's get back to fashion, Sean.
Exactly. Shh. So, of course, we're speaking just after Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales. Black Friday, obviously a huge shopping event for online in the US particularly. A lot of problems with that, but did you notice anything different this year?
Well, in terms of sustainable brands getting involved in Black Friday or just Black Friday full stop?
Sustainable brands or brands, realizing that obviously online delivery causes a lot of waste and there's obviously big problems with consumption.
Well, I think the problem with Black Friday is obviously the excitement and the discounts drive the greed in us that we want to consume and buy. And overconsumption is really the main problem facing the fashion industry and sustainability today. So with Black Friday just having gone behind us, it was a bit of a flop in terms of the entire global Black Friday in terms of sales. Not a flop for, consumption, but sustainable fashions generally find Black Friday a bit of the identity crisis, because if one touts being a sustainable fashion brand, then to discount, slash, and to drive greedy consumption is kind of at complete odds with the core ethos of being a sustainable brand. That said, as we're facing like a huge expenditure crisis with the cost of living going up, businesses, and particularly not just sustainable fashion businesses, but small businesses are obviously feeling the crunch. And so I think this Black Friday was masked by an increased tension between ethics, i.e. don't do it, and the need to survive on the bottom line, i.e. do it. Because Black Friday brings in a hell of a lot of cash for businesses and they rely on it. And I was looking back, and I'm not going to tell you which brand it was, a very, very, very big, quite fast, mega famous fashion brand. One of the head buyers there was speaking about how, they resisted the Black Friday sales until panic, looking at the bottom line, and the exact body language that this particular individual did was mainlining like a heroin shot, saying at the last minute, we just couldn't handle it. We went for Black Friday, and then he stuck, an imaginary needle in his arm, because that injection of cash is much needed by all types of businesses. And so I think the kind of challenge that we saw this year was that sustainable-minded businesses felt the need to do it, as some would say, and some reports are saying, to keep the lights on. We're talking pretty basic stuff. That said, I think sustainable fashion brands some sustainable businesses just found a clever way of financially benefiting without denting their halo, their green halo. And I suppose a couple of examples could be Vestiaire Collected, who announced in the lead up to Black Friday that they would, for the first time, ban fast fashion products on their resale site. And then there were other businesses that, for example, over Black Friday, took out new inventory and instead stopped with their own secondhand brands. So basically, it's a way to make money, but in a way that's akin with their business model. I think that's absolutely fine.
And talking about flops, I just came from COP. Do you have any thoughts on COP? I mean, we don't have any new decarbonization targets. We've announced, governments have announced a sort of fund for worse off countries to deal with it, but nothing tangible, nothing groundbreaking.
Well, I mean, flop and cop, they match, so quite kind of sums it up. I think you're probably floppy cop out. No, I think you're probably a greater climate expert than myself. I wasn't at COP, and whilst I really do understand climate and fashion, I don't pretend to be the world's greatest expert on it because it's a particular field within the fashion industry. So yes, it's disappointing that the fashion industry is sort of facing up to the fact that it's probably not going to meet its targets. And yet the fashion industry also generally knows that its greatest concern looking forward is climate and regulating its impact on climate. And so even though we get, various brands X, Y, and Z are pledging to buy more sustainable, less resource intense fibers by year X, Y, and Z, the challenge of the fashion industry, and it's actually the challenge for the global economy, is that the kind of transformational change is so broad. You can't just source a sustainable organic fiber and expect to meet our targets. So really what I'm saying is that the complexity is so great and the fashion industry is not doing particularly well. And what we actually need to see is everything from renewable energy to supplement or to rather take over coal energy, for example. And we need to have different systems put up such that we can recycle excess materials, push regenerative farming more, get more finance into these new supply chains, etc. So it's not really one-hit wonder solution. And ultimately, the real solution, as we know, but it's not one that the fashion industry likes, is, drumroll, make less clothes. So the fundamental tension that you see in the boardroom, and like with CFOs and with like CSOs, like the sustainability officers, is that if companies want to achieve their targets, hey presto, surprise, surprise, you've got to make less clothes or product. And that's at odds with financial growth. Well, everyone talks about decoupling growth and revenue, etc., from the amount of products that we make. That is the holy grail. But until we built a new kind of model for fashion, it's that mainline heroin drip. Let me sell more clothes. And that is really how the fashion industry makes more money. And so therefore, achieving anything on lower carbon emissions is very, very difficult.
Our Future Nature is brought to you today by Authentic Gallery. Authentic Gallery makes buying and collecting stunning and impactful art easy, with a high percentage of proceeds going towards our vetted partner charities. If you want to buy art and contribute to an impactful cause, well, check out Authentic Gallery. That's spelled AWETHENTIC gallery.com. As a special treat to my listeners, you can use the discount code OFNPOD. That's OFNPOD to get a 10% discount off all of my limited edition prints. So check out Authentic Gallery and start browsing now. Thanks very much. For those of us, for the listeners who don't know the full extent of the problems associated with the fashion industry, some people say that it's one or the second most polluting industry in the world. Maybe you could just outline in general what the fashion industry is sort of responsible for.
Sure. The fashion industry is probably one of the top 3 global polluters. And the reason it's so polluting is because to make textiles is incredibly polluting. So the key badness in all of our clothes is the fiber and the fabrics that are on our back. But on top of that, you've got chemicals, transportation, you've got energy, then you've got, air miles, then you've got packaging, you've got plastic wrapping, there's a lot of other carbon intense, polluting, intense things that get chucked into clothes. But really the key nugget, the key problem is the way that we make fibers. So that makes making clothes very polluting. Now, problem that we have over the last 15, 20 years is that through globalization and through some sort of, is it a lobotomy, a brain lobotomy, is that what you call it? We've kind of gone nuts, meaning we've started buying a lot more clothes, and so much so that we've doubled production over the last 15, 20 years. And in that same time, whilst we're greedily over consuming like crazy, we're also keeping our clothes for a 36%, to be precise, less time before we chuck them away. So we've ramped up consumption. We don't wear our clothes very long. And then the kind of stab in the back, the double, triple slap in the face is that of all clothes produced every single year, about 73% of them will already end up in landfill or incineration. And we're up to, we're over 100 billion new garments every year now. So that's a lot of material that we're literally chucking away and incinerating. So to answer your question, there's two things to make clear. Number one, it's very polluting to make these clothes and textiles. Number two, we're buying them and chucking them away so much. And that is why the fashion industry is like right up there on the polluting pedestal in that top three. You know, congratulations, fashion industry and consumers. We really cocked that one up, didn't we? You know, something that is integral to our lives. You're wearing clothes. I'm wearing clothes. We need clothes. We love clothes. People love overbuying clothes. People are emotionally completely embedded in their wardrobes and their identity. And so we have done a really great job of messing up a beautiful industry and a beautiful product and turning what could be something meaningful and beautiful into tat.
Yeah, and just some interesting stats here to back up what you just said. Shine, the fast fashion brand, has recently increased its production or stock by 370% between 2019 and 2021. And fashion accounts for up to 10% of global carbon dioxide output, which is more than international flights and shipping combined. So it's quite a heavy toll that it's taking on the world. Now, as you said, there's a difference here between fashion and fast fashion. Is there really a distinction between the two, or are we just talking about every kind of fashion or all fashion, if you like? Or is there a distinction to be made between, say, high-end fashion and fast fashion, which is cheap?
Well, number one, there's a million distinctions to be made in that. And I visualize a cake and there's many pieces of the cake. And that's the same as the fashion industry, because you've got haute couture, you've got luxury, you've got mid-market, you've got fast, and you've got ultra-fast. And then you've got second-hand, made-on-demand, resale, rental, all sorts of other new models. So why I say that is that there's no such thing as one type of fashion fit for all. And therefore, each piece of the cake has got a different sort of challenge and a different sort of solution and a different margin for change and a different appetite and driver by that type of customer of that piece of cake. But the problem with fast fashion, I'm actually going to say the problem with ultra fast fashion, because that's really the bottom feeder in terms of price point, is what we all know. It's not very good quality. It's not very good textiles. It's not sewn very well together. It doesn't last very long. It's trend driven. So therefore, you know, if it's pink's in tomorrow, next week, black and white's in, the pink has become obsolete. So we've got planned designed obsolescence into these ultra fast fashion products. So for all those reasons, the fast fashion industry has got a big, and ultra fast has got a very, very big role to play in the overall fashion industry's negative environment impact. You know, okay, that's kind of a no-brainer because there's very simple. This is so simple. Every time you make something, you make a negative impact. So if you keep making it and if you keep making more of it, you keep making more negative impacts. It's very obvious, therefore, that the bulk, cheap, low quality stuff is massive elephant in the room that needs to be addressed. But I say that, and I know that to be true, but it doesn't mean that luxury can sit in its ivory towers, you know, with its fabulous fabrics and its wonderful products, because luxury also has, you know, an environmental footprint to boot. And even though volumes may be lower in totality, they absolutely produce negative impact as well.
Yeah, it's quite a depressing situation. So what you're saying is that trends can be very, alluring, but they're actually not smart from a sort of environmental point of view, and that we should do more to have less trendy fashion and fashion that lasts longer, potentially is made with better materials? Or are you saying we should just wear less clothes? Or are you saying we need to do better with the waste to then put it back into the system? What's the main approach?
I'm saying it all. Yeah, but the approach is multi-pronged, but the very simple answer to your question is that we need to buy less, buy better, and wear more. So if you have a budget of £1 versus £1,000, your same concept applies actually. Buy less, buy better, wear more. So that is the solution. And that solves many problems, i.e. it decreases total production and it keeps materials in use. And critically, it keeps the production value of clothing high, meaning that people keep their jobs. We are not saying that the solution to our crisis in fashion is to stop consuming. Because if you say that, unfortunately, you're just not thinking about all the garment workers and textile manufacturers and farmers. There is a supply chain that is extraordinarily economically important for development. And we have to carry on buying clothes, but we need to do it in a better, more durable way, i.e. we're not losing jobs. That's important. So that is ultimately the solution. But particularly I wanted to come back to your point on trend, because, for some people, they'll buy a black coat and they'll wear it their whole life. They're not, let's just say, trend driven, but there are other types of fashion consumers or customers who love the fact that leopard print is in today and it's not tomorrow. And I've learned over my last 15 years not to poo-poo that person that wants to shop, because I feel it's quite undermining of them as a human being with their own sort of, I want to use meritocracy. I don't think that's the word there. What am I looking at? Their own agency. And I think that the real problem that we have within fashion is that it is so alluring to a lot of people. They want to buy, they want to wear leopard today and pink tomorrow. And I have learned not to point angry fingers at those people, because I think we should recognize the joy that they get from that and say, you love fashion, you love expressing yourself. How are we going to do that in a way that's good for jobs and less bad on the environment? So maybe it's my age, or maybe it's my experience, or maybe it's probably both, but I've softened up any sort of radical anti-consumption approach because it just don't work. I feel that change comes through an inspiration of something positive rather than shame and guilt. I don't like shame and guilt. And so it's the carrot and the stick. Let's get some really damn juicy carrots out there and put the stick away.
Which is, it's a great strategy, but what is that carrot? Like, I think the problem is that in the past, when you have something sustainable or from the circular economy, traditionally the design isn't that good. It's not that creative. It's not as fashionable as, say, the more conventional fashion designs coming off the runway. So what's the carrot? What's the bigger carrot? Is it like, we're going to make it cheaper? Is it, oh, you have a better conscience buying this? Or is it that the government has to regulate these businesses and penalize these businesses if they don't follow better practices, which has its own problems of monitoring and also, bringing these bad actors to justice. So, what is that big carrot and how do we implement it?
Well, I think the big carrot, again, you seem to be answering my questions. And Sean, you are taking my questions and answering them. But yes, the carrot has to be created by all the stakeholders, such that the consumer doesn't really understand that, the carrot has even been formed for them. What that really means, ultimately it's about price point and design and fit, because I don't care how ethical anybody is, they want to look good and they don't want to pay too much for it. So therefore, those are the fundamental cornerstones of this juicy carrot that we're now designing. But then on top of that, all those things you've said, like government legislation, private sector innovation, technology, new fibers, tax breaks, things that they've got no clue about. If that could be embedded into that product, it would make it competitive in price, more of an opportunity for businesses to put these carrots in front of us. And at the moment, it's not really happening. But I think that we're in a really interesting place, and we're still in a very depressing place. But I think what is interesting, if I look at my 15 years, okay, and I've never thought of this, though. It's the first time I'm trying to articulate this. But if the goal is to make a carrot, 15 years ago, there might have been 2 or 3 players, okay? But now, in making this carrot, there's about 500 players cross-sector. So really, there's an acceleration of stakeholders who are still not getting anywhere, but at least the stakeholders are aligned and understanding each of their positions within change. So 15 years ago, you could not have had the amount of potential collaboration that we have today. So that's a positive thing. Something needs a catalyst to make some sparks happen. Mm-hmm. And I feel that for the fashion industry today, all the players are around, they're juggling around or jostling around. And the catalyst that needs to fire up all of these players is going to be cash investment and legislation. So one hopes that theoretically, if we could chuck in some pretty powerful cash incentives, stricter government legislation, which I don't think really is going to happen, theoretically, we could actually see big change in a short period of time.
I wish that were the case. But I mean, we just take an analog here, like looking at the energy industry and seeing how, and going back to your point, like living crisis, cost of living crisis right now, are people willing to spend more on something more sustainable? There's been a huge investment in fossil fuels, despite all the evidence showing that we are headed beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. It's almost like we do what is expedient when the chips are down. So how do you realistically think we're going to move ahead in this strategy of reducing our consumption, reducing our purchases, and buying more sustainable, which are those products are potentially more expensive? So is it realistic? Is it really realistic?
I mean, you said it was depressing.
It's realistic. Yeah, I mean, you know what? There's a new commission by the EU on sustainable and circular textiles, and that's a very long document, which includes many fabulous things, including the push that the EU is going to be having for good design, I'm going to call it. I can't remember what they call it in the document, but in the commission. But essentially, Europe wants to only import well-designed things that are recyclable, durable, better quality fabrics, etc. So that's exciting. I mean, we're a long way off that happening, but you know, the fashion industry is trying to benchmark what is good and what is bad. So I'm answering your question that if we could have regulation, and the EU is definitely leading this in terms of good design, then that will shake up the supply chain to make all players have to sort of, you know, toe the line in improving the quality of the clothes. So that's my only sort of possible light in the dark that could happen. And I have to say, like, you know, Redress's tagline is, we believe in the positive power of fashion. And yes, we do. But actually, if you look at all the stats, it's extremely bad news. And really, if I could just summarize what that really means, is that global population is increasing. The way that we're consuming continues to be unabated and out of control. We've got emerging markets joining their fashion bandwagon. They're going to buy, shop. So we've got more and more consumption coming from these new, fast emerging markets. And so global fashion production and consumption, is set to increase, I think, 60% by 2030. And this number 60% is quite interesting because projections for textile waste are also set to around 60%. So why I'm saying all that is that the more we consume, the more waste, the more carbon, the more water, everything is linked to consumption, production. So really, you know, if consumers could really honestly get to grips with their consumption, we might have a chance of decreasing total volume, but it's quite unlikely in my little lifetime, you know. And I'm only 44. I'm not planning on, you know, like that bust. You never know. But I know for a fact that I'm pretty confident that, you know, issues are like tissues. So said my marriage therapist just before I got divorced. Issues are like tissues. They just keep coming. And that is true of the fashion industry, which is that issues are like tissues, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of issues. And therefore, I'm definitely going to my grave with these problems persisting.
It's not very sustainable to be buried these days, Christina. I thought you would know that.
No, I'm going. I'll change my will. I don't even know if it's in my will. Perhaps I'll get incinerated. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're really on the downward spiral right now. So let's switch gears and talk about more positive things. Because at the end of the day, yeah, there are a huge amount of problems. Too many issues and probably too many unsustainably produced tissues. So what can we do about it? And I think that's what, you know, you inspire people by, you know, you had an unconventional background, as we said before. You started off as a dentist. So let's talk about your route into this. How did you get into the circular economy? What inspired you to do it? Because it's not an easy target, is it? I mean, you seem to be someone who likes challenges. Is that right, Christina?
Well, I love a challenge, but I think my journey here, 15 years on, and I'm only here today because of the way that I came into this sector. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't bother. But the journey was that whilst being a dentist, I had in my belly a sort of outright belief in public health from a social, political, ethical, moral, spiritual, you name it, point of view. I really believe that public health is incredibly important. Who are we to make things on the other side of the world that ultimately will damage other people's health, but just put it very directly. So what I mean by that is that I love public health. And then I retrained as a journalist, and I wrote a lot about all sorts of topics, including environment, pollution, waste, soil pollution, air pollution, water pollution, public health, kept coming back there. I felt outraged that this system of our world of, back then, the stereotypical West consuming from China, let's just say very stereotypical, because that's not the case today. Really, I despise the concept that we global consumers benefit from cheap stuff at the cost of other people's health. That really irritated me. And as I wrote about textile pollution, which actually annoys me more than apparel, like fashion, clothing issues, textile annoys me more because it's much more water polluting, for example, and chemical dyes, etc. So basically, I started Redress in 2007 with a belly load of fury and questions about why on earth are people suffering from this fabulous, fashionable, frivolous industry, which back then seemed frivolous, and today, absolutely, there's nothing frivolous about fashion, absolutely. And so that's really how I got into it. And so why I'm still in it 15 years on, loving a challenge, is because I still hold that belly full of belief that we ought to be able to steward this world without completely screwing some people over, which is what we do. And there was an important couple of years in my little journey where actually I was still qualified as a dentist, and I went off with a portable dental kit, and I was doing free dental services, mainly just pulling people's teeth out. For people who had really, really bad toothache, brave enough to open their mouth to me. And those sorts of people were very marginalized, people from, murderers in prison, sex workers, orphans, very marginalized people in Asia, multiple countries. I went all over the place. And why I tell you that story is because it really made me fall in love with these people who I'll never meet ever again. But they're just such wonderful people who, in my ivory tower here in London, you never get to meet these great people. You have as much right to everything that we have the right to, and yet they have such a zero voice. And yet there are, you can call them brothers and sisters, you can call them fellow humans. They deserve everything that we have and the equal voice to. So, that's really where I'm getting at, is that I just think that the fashion industry is wrong to be making this amount of impact for the price of clothing. Anyway, that's the point. I think it's wrong.
Our Future Nature is also brought to you today by Authentic Journeys. Authentic Journeys brings together high-performing entrepreneurs, CEOs, leaders, and changemakers with ancient and modern modalities for intense personal growth to deeply align your individual and our collective purposes for positive change in the world. All of our trips are carbon offset, and we only partner with companies that have sustainable practices and credentials. Let us take you on a journey that will enrich your mind, body, and soul while helping the planet and local communities. Check out AuthenticJourneys.com. That's AWETHENTIC journeys.com to learn more about our upcoming wellness experiences, travel adventures, and retreats to help you find your all. And we've talked about the environmental impacts of the fashion industry. Obviously, the social impacts are quite important to realize too. You recently went to Uzbekistan and posted on your IG about seeing some people working in the supply chain who didn't look too healthy. There's the argument that these sweatshops are very bad because they put people under tremendously bad working conditions. You also have other people saying it provides jobs and income. Where do you sit on that fence?
Okay, so I'm really not a social issue at all in terms of the ages of people working and the hours of pay, the balance between all of that. So just to really clearly say that, because it's such a sorely complicated issue. But I think, coming back to my recent trip in Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan's got a really tortuous history with cotton production. That, to summarize it, basically global brands have boycotted Uzbek cotton because of proven forced government labor. So, for many, many years, the government was forcing children and adults to go and pick cotton during the harvest time because it's such an economically important crop. So essentially, the country itself has definitely got a long proven, undeniable, forced enslaved labor. Not enslaved, but forced labor. Anyway, the point being around this is that more recently, this global boycott on Uzbekistan has been lifted, i.e. a few months ago, meaning that now global brands can source cotton from Uzbekistan. So that's fabulous. And the reason I posted on my Instagram was that I went into cotton fields and I saw children, and I've called them very short people because I don't want to be what's the word? I mean, they were very, very short people. They definitely looked like children. I saw them picking cotton. Now, the issue around that, well, I don't know under what conditions they were picking cotton. Was it their mum and dad's working on a Sunday, getting their kids to come and help them? Or I doubt it was enforced. I'm digging myself into a hole because I don't know who those people were. Therefore, what I'm actually saying is that in my own eyes, I can see, and anyone working in the industry, that policing and regulating of the fashion supply chain is incredibly important. So even though Uzbekistan is still in the sort of global spotlight, having only recently come out of this global boycott, I saw kids with my own eyes. So the story that I'm sharing with you is more about the realities of how difficult it is to police the supply chain. So we know for sure. So let's just say there's 80 million garment workers out in the world, 75, 80 million, whatever. You can definitely be sure that some percentage of those are in incredibly bad working conditions. And you can be sure that there's violations in all sorts of human rights, etc. So that's something that we have to be realistic about, that there is slavery in the supply chain. We need to go positive, because I did say to you that Redress's tagline is that we believe in the positive power of fashion.
That's right. Yeah.
And actually I do. And I'm going to tell you why.
Tell me a positive story, Christina. I dare you.
Yeah. Oh, there are millions of positive stories. That's why, we love a challenge. But I tell you the best positive story about fashion. And this is why I get up every day and kick ass in fashion. At least I kick my ass. And that is this. So, these sustainable development goals, the 17 of them that are out there to improve the world, as we know, from water to diversity, education, etc. Well, it is said that the fashion industry and its incredibly complicated, far-reaching supply chains can influence all 17 of those sustainable development goals. And so why I love the fashion industry and I say we should get up there and shake it up is because we can improve on all of those SDGs through making fashion better. And as I said, they're all many, many, many stakeholders, all players, innovators, investors, regulators, media, consumers. We're all out there getting ready for this change and making the change happen. So therefore, I am very, very positive about the fashion industry. And I think you have to be positive. Otherwise, go back to bed, watch Netflix. But your positivity must be, grounded in some reality of the actual battle that's on. That is much of what we've just discussed.
But it's an important point, basically saying that you can address a lot of these SDGs by buying more sustainably produced fashion. It's as simple as that. It's not just about the price and how good it looks. You can actually make a difference by making the right choice, which brings me to the next point. How do you know if a garment or dress or a suit is sustainably produced? We all know about greenwashing. We all know about certain certifications not being what they say they are. What do you buy?
Well, I only buy secondhand clothes or clothes made with recycled fibers or upcycled and rescued waste materials. So my big no-no personally, which was a choice I've made for 10 years, is not to buy virgin materials, except for my knickers.
Right.
Get my hands. I do treat myself to knickers.
So where do you get your sustainable knickers from then, Christina?
No, I just buy Marks and Sparks knickers. My knickers are very utilitarian.
Right.
So that for me, I'm really pissed off with virgin production because in my 15-year career, being rather intrigued and obsessed with these topics, I've just been exposed to so much waste from brands, mills, manufacturers, from consumers. I mean, I'm like, a professional textile scavenger, and I really know how much waste there is out there. And then there's much, much more that I don't know about. So why I say all of that is that if anyone were out there listening, if there's one thing you want to do, well, there's two things you need to do. The first thing is just fall in love with your closet. And as I say, see your closet as a window to the world to reflect all the great things you want to see happen in the world, that your consumption is driving those positive SDGs, that you are, every product in your wardrobe should speak to you. And that's my goal. So that's an ethical, sort of wishy-washy, fluffy answer, but it's actually really fundamental. And then for me, I would say just try not to buy virgin materials. So buy secondhand, buy, as I said, recycled. And then to drill down on your question, the other thing is to look for certifications and standards and logo marks on the hang tags if you're worried about greenwashing. My view is, I know greenwashing is all over the place and everyone's talking about it, but my view is global, multinational, big businesses. Yes, I know they're found all over the place for being greenwashers. I get it. But basically, when my experience of knowing the people on the supply chain who are working on very, very complicated fiber and whatever it might be, that when something is labeled as being a bit this and a bit that, generally it is that. So, for example, I mean, I'll tell you, I was involved very peripherally with a project with Kourtney Kardashian and Boohoo a couple of months ago. And Kourtney created a collection with Boohoo, obviously very fast and cheap. That is the business of Boohoo. And the collection that she created, it had some various slightly more sustainable attributes kind of brought into these products. Now, of course, everyone's greenwashing because of the nature of the business model being fast and cheap, and then supposedly it was also going to be, billed as a more sustainable collection. But my view, and I'm not paid by Boohoo, I've no relationship with them at all, neither by Kourtney, etc. But my view of that collection, and I'm going to say the H&Ms, the Zara's, Shein, that's really kind of digging it out there. But so I know people are going to probably send me hate mail to say this, but I know how difficult it is for these ultra fast brands to do anything slightly better than their polluting product. So therefore, to me, who understands the supply chain, I actually go, well done. You actually brought more recycled fibers into your product offering. That's good. Well done. Even though it's still bad. So my fundamental point, and I said it to Kourtney and I said it to Boohoo, and it went on Kourtney's documentary, is that what this collection is something that's just less polluting. It's not sustainable. It's just less bad. And so, again, to your question, I know your question was, you asked me for clear guidance around greenwashing. Well, I think sometimes people have to realize that something marketed as green, eco, whatever it is just less bad. And if you're okay with that, go and buy it. It's not necessarily going to be good.
Talking about greenwashing, I saw on someone's Instagram in the US at a Black Friday sale, it was selling some sort of cushionware or cushions, and it was saying it's sustainable even though it was 100% polyester, which is almost like an oxymoron. So it's just brands just literally putting sustainable or less polluting on their branding just because they want to and they know it sells. So it's you do have to watch out for bad marketing.
Absolutely. But although I just want to say one thing, though, because there is green hushing. Have you heard of green hushing?
Yeah.
Which is, Okay, so, green hushing actually, it's been spoken about for years. It is obviously the opposite of greenwashing. Green hushing is not talking about the stuff that brands are doing. And nowadays, with all of these new regulators on marketing coming down on these big businesses, it's actually a big risk for businesses to say, this is eco X, Y, and Z. And the risk is that they're going to face regulatory costs from huge lawyers' bills for actually misleading. And actually, often they're not misleading. The data is not often out there to verify that this recycled poly is better than that virgin poly. So we can twist our knickers even further on this point, but I just want to say that the thought of this green hushing taking over is, as some people say, a greater risk than greenwashing, meaning that big brands will just say, do you know what, sod it, we're not even going to talk about this. It's not worth the reputational risk, the financial litigation risk. Why the hell should we bother? And I can tell you that a lot of those big brands have spent years developing this stuff that they've just launched, and then bang, head gets chopped off it rolls off the chopping board. Doom, no. And I can honestly say that is, I think, very sad, because I know just how damn complicated it is for these big businesses to bring in this fiber, that fiber, this model, whatever. So all I'm just saying is I just wish people would pause for a nanosecond before they screech greenwashing. And I'm not talking about that polyester cushion thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. It's like, don't let perfect be enemy of the good, right? So some companies are trying to make it a transition. It takes time. That it's not a perfect transition, but they're getting slammed for not making maybe 100% transition. So they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. We can't get in that situation where they're so disincentivized to try and make it different or make a transition that they don't bother at all and go in reverse. I mean, it is a problem, especially in this, woke times 1,000 era where anything wrong anything that's slightly controversial gets amplified on social media. Yeah. So going back to what you do with Our Collective and Redress, Our Collective is more of a social impact business to reuse high quality fabrics and then make them into new products. Is that right? You take the offcuts from the fashion luxury houses and then you make new products out of those. Is that a sustainable model? Can it be economical? Can it make money? Is that the way forward? And would you recommend other people getting into that?
Okay, so the Our Collective rescues luxury brands' excess materials and other waste materials. And we're very strict on what we call waste, meaning we're very much capturing materials that nobody else wants and that no one else is taking and buying. So therefore, we believe strongly that our input is an unwanted material. That's very key. And then with these incoming unwanted materials, we then design into them to put them back to work, as we say. And the sort of V1 of our business is still women's wear apparel, but it's a direct-to-consumer fashion brand. And to answer that little nugget of your question, it's an absolute technical term, BIPCH. If I may be so straight, one needs a hell of a big marketing budget. Anything D2C right now is extraordinarily difficult. Moving on to continue answering your question, the juiciest, most exciting part of what we actually do financially impact-wise is B2B work, which is not really, we don't scream about it because it's not on our website. It's there, but we don't scream about it. But it's actually the lion's share of our revenue, sweat, blood, late night calls, and that is B2B waste management handling for different luxury brands. And through taking bulk materials in, we are making corporate goods. And so to answer your question, we are viable. Next year, hallelujah, we're actually going to break even, apparently. I can't believe it. Like, it's a startup. Yeah, I know. We went through the numbers. We've changed our business model anyway in terms of our revenue. We changed our revenue model next year and where we're going to put our money. And I'm extraordinarily excited that we might break even next year, which is 5 years in. And I'm not going to tell you how much I've invested in it, but it's a lot. So I've learned, that obviously we know that startups need money and that they drop in terms of their profitability and best revenue, but I think we're turning a corner. So that's really exciting. So to answer your question, yes, it's viable. And then the other part of your question, should other people go out and do it? Definitely go out and source waste materials because there is an abundance of them everywhere. But just be really clear also, I would say, what is a waste material? Because there's a secondary market for textiles, that being the jobber market, as we call it, or it's called the dead stock market. And so there's a big trade of textiles in the back end of the fashion industry, and we don't go near that because that's pre-established and it's already circulating textiles. But we go for stuff that doesn't make it into that secondary market.
What role can technology play in all of this, or making it more efficient or making it more viable? For example, there's been a lot of chat about blockchain technology being used for authentication from the actual source to it appearing on a hanger. Do you think that's going to make a difference in the short term, or are we just so far off from that kind of traceability and accountability?
Well, I think technology is required literally every single tiny instancy step of the way. So, we talk about sustainability in the fashion industry, and the first thing that we need is transparency, and then we need traceability on top of that. So the transparency is like, I imagine that, if you want to see what's going on in the window, but the window is covered in dirt, you can't. If you've got a dirty window, you can't see what's on the other side. So the first thing is we need some transparency on what's going on, and then we need traceability. So we need to follow everything that's going on so that we can monitor, improve, measure, etc. Now, just cleaning the window, oh my goodness, that is a big job. So all of this, so to answer your question, without a doubt, okay, we need technology to monitor everything, but I just wanted to give you one little experience. Well, it's not one experience, it's my day-to-day experience, is that we work with luxury brands on their excess materials. And so we're generally about 3 or 4 years behind their production, soaking up excess. And then when we're offered materials, we're offered XLs. And XLs come from factories A, B, C, and D. It's all a mess. The data is a mess. And so we're okay with that because that's the reality. But to answer your question, as we see now with technology improving, that brands are bringing in better inventory management today, now. So it means in 4 years' time, 5 years' time, when we receive data from these businesses, it will be accurate and it will actually there'll be less waste because they're managing their inventory better. So we live in the Excel world. which is very much like living in the Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist time for technology. But that is currently where most of our brands are still storing their data. Old data. Moving forward, it needs to be much more sophisticated, and we'll absolutely see that.
We've talked a lot about the material waste and the pollutants that go into making these garments. We haven't talked much about fashion industry's sort of very wasteful travel practices, having fashion shows all over the world. I mean, no one really talks about it, but do we really need to have fashion shows all over the world and 6 times a year? I mean, isn't there pushback on that? The amount of energy, the amount of effort, the amount of, obviously, CO2 that goes into producing those shows, and everyone traveling all over the world. Is there a sort of commentary going on? I haven't heard much about that. I know some brands have decided to do less shows, but is there any sort of pressure coming from the governments to reduce that showing off, if you like? I mean, I understand from a fashion point of view. I used to work in the fashion business. You need to get your trends out there. You need to get people excited. You need that hype cycle. But that all is extremely energy intensive.
Yeah, and it's very expensive. Fashion shows cost millions if you do the high-end fashion shows. So in answer to your question, we absolutely know that we need these fashion shows to sort of spread the love. The feeling of fashion goes quite deep. So I'm very pro fashion shows. I think that in fashion weeks, I'm waiting for my hate mail. I won't give you my address. I don't want any. But what I'm saying is, I think that the fashion industry needs to have its wings, give it its wings. And part of its wings requires it to do shows and trade shows and selling opportunities, and to bring out new creativity, and to bring out new music, digital, like what's the textile? How does it flow? The beauty of fashion. I mean, if you see a good fashion show, it actually punches your heart. It's so beautiful. And that is part of the fashion industry. So we can't rip that out. I, number one, believe. So I think it's worth the flights, it's worth the hotels and the champagne, all that. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but actually I'm not. A lot of deals are done, relationships are formed, ideas and inspiration are shared. And I don't believe in cutting people's wings off. So therefore I say continue with the shows. I mean, really, the shows though have to be much more purposeful. You know, obviously the big dialogue is actually whether a show is B2B or B2C. Like, for whom is the show being put on? And we saw that radical change in. We now know that fashion shows are much more for the consumer, and consumers can buy immediately. And so we know that the negative side of these shows is frenzy and consumption. Yes, and I know that that's a problem. So to answer your question, I think budgetary restraints are probably the greatest restraint than the desire to reduce CO2 in these big shows. So I don't know the data to say, we have decreased shows by 8% in the last few years, but given the economy and given the impacts of COVID, in terms of the bottom line of businesses, I can pretty much bet my little finger on it that we're spending less and doing less with shows. Now, there's a flip side to that, which is that the solution, and so I do want to say that it's obvious that we should do less shows, but something that's obvious is not always applicable. So what we're actually seeing, though, is the rise of sort of 3D virtual shows, and sort of virtual fashion that can replace some shows. And certainly, the metaverse and digital fashion is something that, again, I'm not an expert on it, but it does allow fashion presentation to happen without physically flying, production, hotels. Because you've got to remember that when people fly, they stay in hotels as well. So it's like the carbon impact goes beyond just the show. So the increase in the metaverse for digital fashion can help present fashion digitally, and therefore one hopes reduce CO2 and impacts around shows.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have 2 startups that I work with on this virtual try-on technology and trying to get that direct-to-consumer engagement so people can try on the new season's looks or, designers' wears and then give them a rating. And so the designer knows that they should produce that without having to produce thousands of SKUs of that item. And then also, of course, you're reducing the return rate for online e-commerce. As you know, for every 10 that someone buys online, maybe 7 or 8 will be returned, which is a huge waste just from a logistics point of view. So getting that better fit online could help to reduce the production of wasteful products, but also
absolutely
the online e-commerce. So it's quite interesting.
I mean, just a quick point on that. Let's just say if you buy 10 things and you return 7 of them, the 7 that you return, even though they're perfectly new might not end up being resold again because the sort of logistics might not bring them back to another logistics center where they can be repackaged, etc. So depending on the price point, some of those returns will never be sold again.
That's right. And by some estimates, it's a $660 billion black hole. It literally, you're just throwing these items. You think you're returning it, but it's literally, you're returning it to be thrown away or incinerated. Yeah. So it's a massive problem. And of course, Amazon pioneered that kind of business model where it's like zero risk or liability for ordering something online. Now that consumer behavior is embedded in our society, it's very difficult to convince people to not buy 10 with the assumption that they can return all 10 of them.
Zara a few months ago was the first of the big players to, in some markets, they are stopping free returns. And, the idea is, could it be a domino effect to wean us, us consumers off easy shop, easy return, click, return, etc. I never go to the post office, but I did go recently, and there's this woman in front of me she looked like she'd done it quite a lot because the staff knew her, but basically she had a massive bag of brand X, Y, and Z, very cheap, that she was returning. And, also a lot of people buy just to put on social media. They buy it, ponce about in their bedrooms, and then they return it. So, I don't know if she was one of them, but all might I say is that the post office staff seem to know her very well.
So we talked a little bit about circular economy. Maybe you could just summarize again what exactly the circular economy is, and then going back to, best practices. Someone buys something sustainable, even if they buy it secondhand, they want to get rid of it. How do you dispose of the fashion? What is the best practice in your opinion?
Okay, so the circular economy has got many definitions. I'll try this one. It might not come up right, but it's the circular economy is a system where all materials are designed to be reused and recycled and kept in the system, and no waste is created. That I just made up. It could be right, could be wrong, but it's basically something like that.
It sounded right. You said it with conviction.
And then, the point about circular economy is that nothing goes to waste. That's the goal of it. And so most people think of the circular economy and fashion to do with exactly your question, which is like, I buy some clothes, I don't want it anymore, and then I must go and recycle it. That is like a macro circular economy that means that my waste goes back into fashion. And that's definitely the goal, although it's very much not really the reality. But then you just conceptually got to realize that there are lots of circular economies within the fashion supply chain before you buy your garment. So there's multiple circles going on, like a giant scribble circle all over the place when you drill down. But to answer your question, if someone buys something and then they don't want it anymore for whatever reason, the goal is to keep that product in use for as long as possible. So the goal should actually not to be good to go and donate it to a charity, and the goal should not be to go and donate it to a textile recycler. The goal should be keep wearing it, restyle it, repair it. What's wrong with it? Tailor it. I follow this amazing girl on Instagram who's talks about the quality of clothes, and she's like, the best cheat to have an expensive looking wardrobe is to go see a tailor. So I want to challenge that person and challenge you on your question, which is say, don't get rid of it. Find a way to keep reusing it. Now, I have decided, I know that we need to carry on consuming because I believe in job creation, but I've made my personal decision, which is I'm not going to buy for a year clothes. Because, I do have a bit of a charity shop habit, thinking, it's only a charity shop, I can go and pop in again. And I realized that I've just got too many clothes. So for me, what I'm going to do is not buy clothes for a year. I know it's bad for the economy, so I'm wearing that. And instead, I'm going to style and keep, repair, tailor, and really milk to death the clothes that I've already got. And so I want to make it clear that you've got to keep your clothes in use. And if you can't find a way to use them yourself, swap them with a friend, give them to somebody. And really, the last thing you really want to be doing is donating it to a charity, because charities have got way too much to sort.
Yeah.
So keep it in use in your own community.
I'm so glad you said that, Christina, because I'm wearing a shirt from Patagonia here, which I've had for years. You can see it's even got a mark here. And then people say, why do you keep it? It's like, because it's like a freckle. It won't go away, like a freckle.
Yeah.
There you go. But it's beginning to smell a little bit. And, my brother comments on it, because the problem with these nylon or these polyester fabrics is they don't last long. I don't know what to do. I don't want to get rid of it.
No, I don't. I think, go on. What's your question?
Do you think, is the smell okay, is the question?
Well, I can't smell you, so I can't answer the question. But I would say that actually I'm a real fanatic fanatic when it comes to consumer care, meaning how you wash, care, launder, iron, dry, clean, etc. your clothes. Because by and large, it depends if we're talking about your underpants, which you ought to clean every day, versus your outer coat that you might dry clean once every 3 years, whatever. So therefore, the impact data varies by what we're talking about. So but generally, let's just say roughly 50% of the carbon impact actually comes from us from washing, overwashing, over towel drying. So therefore, in my little view, to reduce carbon and reduce fashion's impact, we have to take better care of our clothes. In fact, we wrote a book on this as well. Redress did Dress with Sense. So coming back to your pongy top, the problem is that's a synthetic and you're a sweaty beast is that you ought not to be washing that very often because every time that synthetic's going through the wash, we've got microfibers, etc. So stuff that you sweat on a lot, you should wear natural fibers so that when it's going through the washing machine, at least we're not having so much microfiber from synthetics coming out from clothes. You could spot clean your armpits. We're getting very specific now, but also this genuinely works. And it's not hocus pocus, tree hugger nonsense, what I'm about to say, but genuinely bicarbonate of soda gets rid of odors. So, you have to Google it, but you can just make a paste with bicarbonate of soda, put it on your armpits, leave it down. I promise you'll be smelling roses before you know it.
It's nothing's wrong with my armpits, Christina. Let's just get that right. I'm just like, when you go for a brisk walk in the humidity of Singapore, things can happen. But you bring up a good point there, and this is, really getting down into the weeds here. People just wash their clothes too often, right? People are like, oh, I wore it today, I got to wash it. When I was at school, I'm not saying I was in any way mistreated or suffered, but I wore a uniform, I wore it for the whole week or for 2 weeks, but now you're expected to wash something every day.
Yeah.
And then the microplastics coming out of that is horrific. That's what really scares me. And then the tumble drying, the energy that goes into it. So what is the recommended?
Honestly, it depends. Again, are we talking pants, t-shirts, socks? I think it really depends on what you've been doing in your clothes, to be quite honest. But generally, wash less. Absolutely. Wash colder, cooler, and with, a more sort of sustainable detergent, like less chemically laden. Also, spot cleaning is really important. If you've got a tiny bit of ketchup on your sleeve, just wash the sleeve. You don't have to wash the whole thing. But there's a couple of really important things to this. Basically, money always makes people change, and industry and us and everything. So, number one, the more you wash your clothes, the more you're buggering them up. You only need to look in your tumble dryer to see all that sort of fluff that comes out on the filter. That is your clothes that are being damaged. So, number one, if you're spending money on your clothes, you don't want to overwash them if you want them to stay longer. Secondly, as we talk about this energy crisis, it's very interesting to me that these external, tremendously complex, a war in Ukraine is obviously changing our global economy and it's therefore changing our energy prices. But that in itself will change behaviors quicker than anything ever. So why I'm saying all that is that we're changing behaviors. Apparently in the UK, everyone's rushing out to buy curtains from charity shops because finally people decided to hang curtains to keep the warmth in. People are washing their clothes less. They're not using their tumble dryers. They're choosing not to have their electricity on or their heating on, and they're putting coats on. They're buying woolly jumpers. So all I'm just saying is obviously that's not a nice solution, but behavioral change does happen quickly when it needs to happen. So who knows? Maybe we'll end up washing our clothes less and less and less as we understand that it's expensive and unnecessary to be overwash.
People often say, how do I live more sustainably? Well, it's live like your granny used to. Your grandparents always reused everything. They didn't wash so often. They didn't consume so much. And it's kind of going now back into that direction, perhaps, in certain parts of the world anyway. I just wanted to finish off here with the microfibers issue because, I do a lot of work on the plastic recycling issue myself with some of the startups we work with. But the microplastic, it's the problem that you just can't solve. We talk about plastic bottles, not using plastic straws. These are symbolic of the big problem. We can, to a certain extent, pick up the large plastic bits. Not a very high efficiency, but there are solutions. There are people working on the solutions. Getting microplastics out of the marine ecosystem is a generational, multi-generational, technologically almost impossible problem. And every time we put our clothes into a washing machine, we are just pumping microplastics into the sewage system. It doesn't get filtered out, it goes straight into the ocean. And 35%, it's estimated, 35% of all microplastics in our environment come from synthetic materials like the one I'm wearing when we wash it. Now, how do you deal with that?
Well,
this is I guess this is like a motivational kind of question. Like,
yeah, well,
how do we actually deal with this problem?
Buy fewer synthetic clothes, unless where they functionally you really need them to be synthetic. Like, if you go do yoga or you run or you ski or you swim, like we need synthetic fibers unless you have a flabby arse all over the place. So, synthetics are here to stay. So there are a lot of cheap polyester products which we could eliminate immediately. Buy a second-hand cotton version of that at the same price point if you're price conscious, for example. So we do need to decrease polyester. Polyester currently is 63% fashion fibers. So because it's cheap, there's a lot of it. So number one is reduce polyester synthetic consumption where possible. The second one is obviously to wash less. So spot clean the polyesters and the synthetics. And the third one is, even to the point that they say, this is so minute, I don't really believe it, but you're supposed to use liquid detergent instead of powder because it's less abrasive. You can put your clothes on a really short cycle, and particularly a short spin cycle, because when that machine is spinning like, the whole house is vibrating. That's when a lot of the fibers are coming out. So a very short spin cycle would be much better. You can obviously, there's this thing called the guppy bag, which is basically a very tightly woven bag.
I love the guppy bag.
Yeah. And then you're supposed to obviously get the fibers out and put them in the bin. Don't put them in the water, otherwise what's the point? When, the guppy bag, meaning you put all your polyesters in there. At the end of the cycle, you scrape out the fiber that's inside the bag, particularly. But all of that said, obviously, I hate putting a polyester load on. Obviously, I do occasionally have to do it. It makes me feel rather sick. It's that bad. I'm with you on that. I think it's disgusting. A typical family washing load with polyester, obviously, is 700,000 microfibers in every single wash. Disgusting. As you've already said, you can't get that out. They've found microfibers in human poo because it's coming up the food chain through the fishes, and we're ingesting that as well. So it's utterly disgusting. So washing less is going to be the solution. Spot washing and buying less polyester.
Well, on that note,
on human poo, it might be time to
swimming
finish.
in our own microplastic shit. I want to get your top 3 tips, Christina, for being a change maker, for being a social entrepreneur, if that's what I can call you. For someone aspiring to be cleaning up fashion's bad act, what would be your top 3 tips?
I would say discover what you're really passionate about within huge options out there. And once you've found what you're passionate about, continually be curious about that one topic and dig and dig and dig. And basically, I would say never give up. And what that means is never give up at approaching your problem from a new lens. So I would say that one of the reasons I've been successful and still being here today, whether I'm successful or not, is that I am a bit like a dog with a bone. And if you've watched a dog with a bone, they keep turning that bone over, sucking it, chewing it. Sometimes you get nothing. You flip it over, you growl a bit, and then you discover that there is something there. But you've got to really love your bone, and it's got to matter to you, whatever that is, and just keep gnawing at it.
You've got to lick it from every angle.
And occasionally it's something yummy.
Yeah. Okay, great. And, just to sort of tie this all up with a nice little Tiffany bow, no product placement here. Isn't it the problem that we have to make sustainable fashion aspirational? So whatever we're talking about here, if we look drab and we look like hippies and it's not aspirational, then other people won't want to be like you or me, and they won't go and buy similar things. How do we do that? How do we make it sexy? How do we make this something that the Kardashians are wearing every day and then everyone else will follow them?
But it's sort of happening already. And I think that old tree hugger, old perception is because the early sustainable designers of 10 years ago were true tree huggers and champions and ethical designers, but perhaps they weren't very good at design. Let's just leave it at that. But today we're seeing complete mainstreaming of the ethos and philosophy of sustainable design. So I really think that the Courtneys and the Kims and Angelinas of this world are wearing it, and it's everywhere. So I really think that there's absolutely zero style cost to be compromised in the pursuit of ethics and sustainability.
So there are enough options out there. We just got to go and find them.
Billions of options. I mean, just go charity shop and that's it. You don't have to buy new stuff. It is absolutely everywhere. Rental, resale, sustainable startup brands, mass market, global brands, capsules, your friend's closet, your granny's wardrobe, it's everywhere. You don't have to just go and overconsume new virgin materials.
So from your point of view, finally, Christina, what do you need help with? How can people help and how can people find you online? What are your social channels?
I'm on Dr. Christina Dean on my Instagram. Redress, the charity, is Get Redressed, and the Art Collective is The Art Collective. So it'd be wonderful to have people follow, comment, and just get engaged on any of those platforms. Mine is a bit like, here I was on holiday. You won't get too much on mine, but... and I think how people can help is just like wake up and have fun with their clothes, put their purpose into their wardrobe and get on with it, really.
But always buy new knickers. That's the thing that's going to stay in my mind. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Christina.
All right, Sean.
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And we will definitely let you know when we post this. And obviously, we'll share as much as we can all the great knowledge that you've spread here for the world and carrying out the great work. One thing I will say is that you have the best set of teeth I've ever seen on a, hippie tree hugger. So... must be those.
There we go. I'll put that on my LinkedIn. Great set of gnashes.
Great set of gnashes.
All right.
Thanks so
Sean,
much
take
again.
Care. Chat soon. See you then.
Speak
Bye.
soon. Cheers then.
Thank you for tuning in to Our Future Nature. Please remember to like and subscribe to keep up with the latest episodes. And if you enjoyed the podcast, it'd be really helpful if you could take a few minutes to leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please also follow us on Instagram and Threads at Our Future Nature Pod for behind the scenes and additional resources, or on X at OFN_podcast. That's OFN_podcast. You can find our social media pages on the podcast episode description. You can also follow me at Sean Lee-Davies if you want to be updated on the work that I do in green entrepreneurship, advocacy, and conservation. And finally, Our Future Nature is powered by the team at Authentic Studio. Thanks everyone, and see you next time.